Dzień dobry. Jestem Armstrong i pracuję w ambasadzie amerykańskiej w sekcji polityczno-wojskowej. Jestem w Polsce tylko 6 miesięcy i już powiedziałem wszystko, które znam po polsku. Więc proszę mi wybaczyć, I think it's probably best that I speak in English today. You understand English much better than I speak Polish. And I apologize for that. I'm working on my Polish, but your English is certainly much better than my Polish. It is a pleasure to be here with you today and to speak to you here in Łódź. It's a beautiful city. This is my second time in Łódź, and I'm very pleased to be here to be part of this great panel to talk about the important subject of NATO. President Obama recently called NATO the most successful alliance in human history. That's a bold statement, but I think that it's true. Since its inception in 1949, NATO has helped keep the relative peace in Europe and has protected its members from attack and invasion by relying on a principle of collective defense. Now, for NATO, collective defense is the underlying guiding principle of the entire alliance. And it comes from Article 5 of the NATO Charter. And Article 5 says, the parties, the members, agree that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all. And consequently, they agree that if such an armed attack occurs, each of them, in exercise of the right of individual or collective self-defense recognized by the Charter of the United Nations, will assist the party or parties so attacked by taking such action as it deems necessary, including the use of armed force to restore and maintain the security of the North Atlantic area. Now, spoken more simply, what that means is, for NATO and its members, an attack on one member is an attack on all members. An attack on the United States is an attack on the United Kingdom. An attack on the United Kingdom is an attack on Poland, and an attack on Poland is an attack on the rest of the members of NATO. This collective security defense is the essence of the alliance. It's the reason the alliance exists. Now, the alliance is involved in a lot of other activities that are related to this collective defense. But that is the guiding principle and the biggest value for the organization, and the biggest value for each of us individually as members of the alliance. Now, the United States, we know firsthand of the strength and vitality of that Article 5 commitment, because immediately following the terrorist attacks, or shortly following the terrorist attacks in the United States, on September 11, 2001, for the first time in its history, NATO invoked its collective defense principle in support of the United States. So that principle of collective defense has only been invoked one time, and it was in defense of the largest country in the alliance. Now, as a representative of the United States government and the United States people, we are grateful for the support of our allies in making that determination, and the continued support in assisting us in protecting our interests and your interests, particularly in Afghanistan. And I thank you all, the Polish people, for your steadfast commitment to the efforts of NATO in Afghanistan. I think that shows your commitment to the principles of freedom, democracy, human rights that NATO stands for. Now, when NATO was founded in 1949, the threat was very evident, right? NATO was founded to combat what was and also was perceived as the threat from the Soviet Union to Western Europe and to the Western world. And NATO existed from 1949 to 1989 with a single-minded focus on defending Western Europe from the Soviet Union. And for 40 years, everything the alliance did was to build toward that aim. Now, things changed, obviously, and fortunately, with the collapse of the Soviet Union. And in 1991, NATO entered into a period of transformation. Because if the reason that the organization existed was to combat the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union no longer existed, what was the value of NATO? Didn't we win, and shouldn't then NATO fade away? And there were many that called for that to happen. But there were many others who were very wise and saw the value in having a collective the value of the principle of collective defense, and the value of having an organization with all members from Europe and North America that focused on preserving democracy, human rights, and that way of life. So what happened is the alliance transformed, and it transformed from one looking simply to combat the Soviet Union to one looking to expand and include what were once former foes into the alliance, and to create a forum where we could all cooperate together and we could work together for the security of Europe and for North America. And NATO expanded, including 6 former Warsaw Pact countries, such as Poland, and 3 Baltic countries. And the alliance became even more focused on principles of individual liberty, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Now, that process of transformation from 1991, after the fall of the Soviet Union, has kind of run its course, right? NATO is now established as kind of a new vision of NATO, with more expanded members. And many are now asking similar questions. Well, with the Soviet Union gone, and now all of these former nations within the Soviet sphere now incorporated into NATO, we're at another moment of transformation. And there are many who say NATO's purpose has now once again run its course. That we've won in our battle against the Soviet Union, and we have succeeded in incorporating the former Soviet sphere into the Western world, and now again, there are some who call for NATO, that NATO is no longer necessary. The United States, we feel very strongly that NATO is as necessary now as it ever was. Simply that maybe our mission and our focus continues to change. Today, while collective defense remains the keystone of the NATO relationship, meaning that all 28 nations in NATO and all 900 million people who live under the umbrella of NATO's protection can count on NATO to protect us, can count on the rest of the members of that alliance to have our backs, as we say in English, if someone were to attack us. And that's important. But NATO has also developed 2 additional areas or principles to focus on. And the first is to focus on issues of crisis management. What that means is NATO recognizes that there are events and conflicts, situations in the world that go on, that even though they may not presently be a direct attack on NATO and its members and its members' territorial integrity, can affect our security. And that we all as an alliance should be proactive in combating those situations and diffusing those situations. And in crisis management, what we do is we use the full spectrum of all of NATO's military and, more importantly, political capabilities to one, address crises that have the potential to affect the alliance before they turn into a conflict, right? Before something turns into a conflict that can threaten our territorial integrity, we can use our influence to diffuse that situation. We can also take a role in active conflicts that have the potential to affect our security. An example of that is Libya, where NATO, and particularly the nations of Europe, saw the situation in Libya as being something that had the potential to affect the physical security of Europe. And NATO took the collective decision to act to diffuse that situation. And the third area is where the alliance works in post-conflict situations to step in and stabilize the situation. And there are NATO missions in the Balkans, for example, where Polish troops are involved to help stabilize that situation and prevent new conflicts from coming up. So NATO sees these as being important areas to focus. The other one is something that NATO calls cooperative security. What that means is partnering with countries and regions and groups outside of NATO in conflict situations that are perhaps outside of our borders. Now that doesn't mean that we're going to send troops, but it means that NATO takes an interest in what happens in the Pacific, for example, and in East Asia, because we know that if something were to go horribly wrong there, it could affect our security. So we cooperate and use our political influence to help diffuse situations that may arise there. Now, that's the benefit that NATO can give us today. The most important of those benefits for the United States, and certainly the most important benefit for Poland, is still that principle of collective security, our collective defense. That an attack on Poland is an attack on every member of NATO. And that gives a protective umbrella to Poland and to every member of NATO that lets those who would attack Poland know that by attacking Poland, it wouldn't just be attacking Poland, it would be attacking 900 million members of NATO. Now, as the nature of, not only is the world changing politically, but the security threats that we face are also changing, right? The Soviet Union was an identifiable threat, this giant country with lots of conventional forces that could overrun our western borders, and we could defend against that. Today, that is much less likely than it was in the past. But we still face security threats, and we've got security threats in the form of terrorism, in the form of cyber attack, in the form of international crime, in the form of human and narcotics trafficking, and all of these things that actually threaten the security, the physical security of our member nations. Because of that, NATO is in the process of transforming. And the first part of that transformation occurred in the NATO Lisbon Summit in 2010, and it will continue in the NATO Summit in Chicago in May of this year. We'll have another summit of all the leaders of NATO. President Komorowski and others from Poland will be there along with President Obama to discuss what we see as the vision for NATO for the future. One of the #1 issues on the plate of the leaders at these summits is the economic situation, the current economic situation in Europe and the United States. No country in NATO is in a position where it can spend as much as it wants on defense, not even the United States. We have huge defense cuts coming in the United States to the tune of $850 billion or $450 billion over 10 years. That's a lot of money. What that means is that the United States has to make some hard choices about how we spend our money and where we put our forces. Many of you are probably familiar with recent statements made by Secretary Panetta and by President Obama describing the U.S. presence in Europe and the U.S. involvement in Europe. I want to make clear that the U.S. is committed to Europe. The U.S. is committed to Europe's defense, and the U.S. is particularly committed to Poland. But that changes are inevitable as the world changes. NATO, in addressing these changes and knowing that they are coming, are taking steps to try to meet these challenges. NATO Secretary General Rasmussen has introduced what he calls smart defense. Has anyone heard of smart defense? Maybe? Okay. Smart defense, in Rasmussen's mind, is countries need to be smarter about how they spend their defense money. They need to spend it in a better way to get full value out of every defense euro, every defense zloty, every defense dollar. We need to spend it smarter. And that goes along with EU concepts of pooling and sharing of forces. What all of this means is one, that under smart defense, we as members of NATO figure out what each of us can do well, and we focus on that. And we rely on others to do other things well. And we pool together our capabilities so that as an alliance, we are capable to, in all aspects of our military forces, but each and every country may not be capable in every one. And that we recognize that certain capabilities are very expensive. And not every country can afford every capability. But together, as an alliance, we can afford expensive capabilities if we each contribute our part. The first part of this so-called smart defense is the example is the Alliance Ground Surveillance System. It's called AGS. And what it is a system with a bunch of remote-controlled robot drone airplanes with very cool sensors on it, very science fiction, that can conduct surveillance of battlefields. And that capability is great. It's a kind of capability that our generals in the field really want. But it's super expensive. And Poland can't afford it. And France can't afford it. The UK can't afford it on their own. But pooling your money together, we can afford it. And recently it was announced that there is an agreement countries, and we hope Poland will be included in this agreement, to contribute money to buy this capability for NATO. And that's an example of smart defense, of pooling our money together to become more capable as an alliance and do things together that we couldn't do separately. Now the other example is that we don't duplicate capabilities. That we find things that each country does really well and wants to focus on. And they focus on those capabilities and other countries focus on other capabilities, and together we have a total, comprehensive, effective force. Does anyone know what Poland does best militarily? Any ideas? None? You, Poland, are great at special operations forces. You guys know what special operations forces are? Like Navy SEALs, Green Berets, and the Polish forces. You're excellent at that. And Poland has committed money to become great at special forces. And that is one of the things that Poland will do well and contribute to the alliance. Now, the Czech Republic is terrible at special forces. They don't have special forces, right? But they're really good at intelligence gathering. So the Czech Republic is going to focus on intelligence gathering. And Poland is going to focus on special forces. And France is going to focus on air refueling. And every country is going to focus on certain capabilities that together, combined, create a force that has the capability to defend NATO. And that's what smart defense is. And the United States, we're particularly fond of special operations, and our special operations forces work hand in hand with your special operations forces every day, in Poland and in Afghanistan. And you all do very good work, and we're very glad to have that partnership, and that is a partnership that will continue in the future. Now, even in times of these economic cutbacks in the United States that may make it seem that the United States is pulling back from Europe, the United States is not pulling back from Poland, and it is quite the opposite. In my office, we are working on two projects especially that will increase U.S. presence in Poland. The first is a detachment of Air Force personnel who will permanently be stationed here in Poland, near Łódź, in Łódź. Does everyone know where Łódź is? Right? Soon you are going to have American U.S. Air Force airmen living and working in Łódź. They will live there, they will work there, they will permanently be rotating through there. They will be in Łódź because several times a year we're going to send F-16s, U.S. F-16s, and U.S. Hercules C-130s to Poland to do training. And that is a presence in Poland that we've never had before. And that should open either October or November. There'll be some activities involved with the opening of that, and I encourage all of you to participate in those activities. The other thing that my office is working hard on is the missile defense system that in 2018 will be installed near Rejkovo in the northern part near the Baltic Sea. That will be have U.S. personnel working on part of our missile defense system, part of the European Phased Adaptive Approach. Both of those things give the U.S. more presence in Poland than we've ever had before. So as you think about and you read about a decreased U.S. presence in Europe, perhaps overall, know that the U.S. is firmly committed to Poland, and that we will be in Poland in greater numbers in the foreseeable future, because we see in no greater partner in this part of the world than Poland, and we hope that you see no greater partner in your security than the United States. I want to close with some words from Secretary Clinton. She said these words recently when she was in Munich, at the Munich Security Conference. And she was speaking about Europe, but she might as well also have been speaking specifically about Poland. And she said, "Europe is and remains America's partner of first resort. And wherever America is working to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons, to fight disease, to help nations on the difficult journey from dictatorship to democracy, we are side by side with our friends in Europe, and also with our friends in Poland. When Americans envision the future, we see Europeans as our essential partners, and we see Poles as our essential partners, and we see NATO as our essential partner. And we hope that you, when you look at the future, see America as your essential partner, and also NATO as your essential partner. I hope that you look to NATO and the protections of Article 5, collective defense, and you rest more easily knowing that America and 26 other nations within NATO have your back. That we're here to protect you, and that you can make decisions for the future of Poland and Poland's military based on that assurance. Dziękuję bardzo za uwagę i czekam na wasze pytania. Okay? Dziękuję.